You know, usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of absolute precision, right?
Right, like mechanical engineering or something.
Exactly. You fall off a bike, you break your arm, and the X-ray goes up on the light board, and it just shows that, that jagged white line right in the bone.
Yeah, and the doctor just points a pen at it and says, well, there it is. That's the problem.
Right. It's so concrete.
It's completely binary. I mean, it's either broken or not broken. You put a cast on it, the bone knits together, and the mechanical system is just, well, it's repaired.
And I think I find an immense amount of comfort in that kind of biological materialism. Like, we really like our bodies to be visible and categorized.
Oh, absolutely. We want them to be fundamentally fixable with, physical tools.
But then you step into the world of the human mind.
Yeah, that's where things get messy.
Right. You step into neurodevelopment or consciousness or like psychological trauma, and suddenly that incredibly precise X-ray machine is just completely useless.
It really is. You're looking at a diagnostic landscape that isn't clean or binary at all.
It's murky. I mean, it's basically a spectrum of completely invisible processes that we're desperately trying to quantify.
I'd say it is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters.
Yeah.
Because when you move from the bone to the brain, you're moving from simple mechanics to literally the most complex structure in the known universe.
Which is wild to think about. Like, we have MRI machines that can show us blood flow, right?
Right.
And we have chemical assays that can show us neurotransmitter levels, but we still have absolutely no idea how those physical processes actually generate the subjective feeling of being alive.
Exactly. The actual spark of consciousness is still a total mystery.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Because if standard neurodevelopment is muddy waters, the source material we are diving into today is going to ask you to question the existence of the water entirely.
That is a very good way to put it.
We are pulling from an incredibly thought-provoking and frankly just staggering article published on a Substack called SpiralSeekr.
Yeah, SpiralSeekr. It's quite the publication.
It really is. And the piece is titled DMT as a Quantum Catalyst.
Which is a heavy title.
Right. And the central hypothesis here, it doesn't just challenge neuroscience. It challenges the very foundation of how you perceive the physical world around you.
That title alone sets a very distinct, very radical tone, I think. Because we aren't just talking about pharmacology here.
Right. It's not just chemistry.
No, we aren't just talking about the biochemistry of a psychedelic compound. By bringing the word quantum into the discussion of DMT, the author is immediately signaling a complete paradigm shift.
They really are.
They are bridging molecular biology with essentially subatomic physics.
Right. And to understand the weight of that claim, I feel like we have to understand the mind behind the source.
Definitely. SpiralSeekr isn't a typical fringe blog.
Not at all. They describe their project as this cross-disciplinary exploration of the trajectory of mind and the nature of existence.
Which sounds very philosophical.
It does. But they live at this very specific intersection of hard empirical science and deep philosophical inquiry. And the source text actually references a few of their other essays, which I think really helps calibrate how analytical their approach is.
Yes, looking at their broader body of work is essential here.
Yeah.
Because it proves they aren't just throwing around buzzwords,
Right.
They apply this really rigorous, almost ruthless biological lens to human experiences.
Like, take their piece on the biology of crying. Most places would treat crying purely as an emotional event, right?
Right, just like a psychological release of sadness.
Exactly. But SpiralSeekr analyzes it as a literal mechanical evacuation of stress chemicals.
Which is fascinating.
It is. They break down how tears of grief actually contain different protein signatures. Like, they have higher levels of adrenocorticotropic hormones than, say, tears caused by chopping an onion.
Yeah, they examine how the physical act of crying stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. It literally forces the body to administer its own natural painkillers.
Wait, really? Painkillers?
Yeah, like leucine and kephalin. It's a hypermaterialist, deeply biological breakdown of an emotional state.
Wow. And they apply that same rigorous skepticism to popular wellness trends, too. Like, the text mentions their teardown of the blood type diet.
Oh, right. The Peter J. D'Adamo hypothesis.
Yeah, the idea that your blood type should somehow dictate your nutritional intake.
SpiralSeekr completely dismantled that. They looked at the stark lack of empirical validation and pointed out that, lectins don't actually agglutinate in the body based on ABO blood types the way the diet claims.
Right, they demand structural mechanics. They demand actual proof.
They do. They also covered Stendhal syndrome, which is another great example.
Oh, I found that one fascinating. That's the documented phenomenon where someone has this profound aesthetic experience, right?
Exactly, like standing in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence and looking at an unbelievably beautiful Renaissance painting.
Right, and then they experience acute psychosomatic distress. Their heart rate spikes, they get dizzy, they hallucinate, they even faint.
Just from being overwhelmed by art.
Yeah, it's wild.
Stendhal syndrome perfectly illustrates that feedback loop between the external world, the conceptual mind, and the physiological meat suit, so to speak.
Yeah, a purely conceptual realization of beauty triggers a massive autonomic nervous system failure,
Exactly.
which makes their central claim in this DMT article so jarring. I mean, here is a publication that meticulously breaks down the chemical realities of tears and aggressively debunks pseudoscience diets.
Very grounded stuff.
Very grounded. Yet their mission in this specific text is to argue that the profound breakthrough experience triggered by the psychedelic compound N N-DMT is not a hallucination.
Which goes against everything mainstream science says.
It does. They say it's not a chemical misfire in the brain. They are actually hypothesizing that it is a literal quantum-level unlocking of a pre-existing higher dimensional reality.
It's a breathtaking claim, especially from a source that clearly understands classical biology so well.
Yeah, it's not coming from a place of ignorance.
Not at all. They are suggesting that our entire framework for understanding consciousness and reality itself is fundamentally flawed.
So, to understand what they are proposing, I feel like we have to look at what they're fighting against first.
Good idea.
The text spends a significant amount of time dismantling what it calls the neuromaterialist paradigm. So what exactly is the author targeting here?
Well, the neuromaterialist paradigm is really the bedrock of modern neuroscience, psychiatry, and honestly, our entire modern secular worldview.
Okay.
It's the assumption that the brain is just a complex biological machine, and that consciousness, everything you think, feel, dream, and experience is strictly the emergent byproduct of physical matter interacting in classical, predictable ways inside your skull.
An emergent byproduct, meaning like if you just pile up enough neurons and run enough electricity through them, eventually, magically, you get self-awareness.
Precisely. It relies entirely on classical Newtonian physics. In this view, a neuron is really just like a wire in a computer.
Just a piece of hardware.
Right. It fires an electrical signal down its axon. It releases a packet of chemicals across a tiny gap, which is called a synapse. And then the next neuron catches those chemicals and fires its own signal.
And that's it.
That's it. If you map all those connections, you map the mind, period. There is no magic, there is no soul, and there is certainly no quantum mystery.
So you were basically just, as the text provocatively quotes from traditionalists, a meat machine generating illusions.
Exactly, a meat machine. And the text points out how this traditional rigid framework treats a DMT breakthrough, which is really telling.
Oh yeah, it has this great, slightly mocking phrase for it. It says, the neuromaterialist establishment dismisses the experience as an extravagant neurological aberration.
Or a chaotic storm of serotonergic agonism.
Yes, chaotic storm of serotonergic agonism, which is a mouthful. Let's break that down because I think it perfectly captures their critique.
Serotonergic agonism is really a perfect encapsulation of the classical view. So your brain uses various chemicals to communicate across those synaptic gaps we talked about.
Like serotonin.
Right, serotonin is a major one. It's heavily involved in regulating mood, visual processing, cognition, all of that.
Okay.
Now, an agonist is simply a foreign molecule that happens to have the right physical shape to fit into a specific receptor and activate it.
So it's like a skeleton key.
Yes, exactly like a skeleton key opening a lock it wasn't originally designed for.
And N-DMT is known to fit perfectly into the 5-HT2A serotonin receptors, right?
Exactly. So the neuromaterialist looks at an MRI or a chemical assay of a brain on DMT, and they see the synapses flooding. They see this massive chaotic binding at those 5-HT2A receptors.
And then what?
And they stop right there. They say, look, the hardware is glitching, the chemistry is out of balance, therefore, whatever the subject is experiencing, the alien entities, the bizarre geometric landscapes is just static.
It's random noise.
Right. It's the output of a broken machine. It's completely meaningless.
I have a serious problem with that logic, though. I mean, so they just see a chemical hitting a receptor, they see the system behaving differently than normal, and they immediately assume everything following that binding event is garbage data.
That is the defining arrogance of the neuromaterialist approach, at least according to SpiralSeekr.
It just seems so dismissive.
It is. Because the experience doesn't align with waking, survival-oriented reality, traditional science automatically categorizes it as pathology, a hallucination, a misfire.
It's like, okay, think about looking at a computer screen that's suddenly glitching out.
Oh, okay.
Let's say you're looking at a standard desktop, right? And out of nowhere, the screen starts displaying these incredibly intricate, hyper-complex, shifting fractal patterns in a billion colors.
Like a crazy screensaver.
Yeah. The neuromaterialist approach is to open up the computer tower, look at the graphics card, see that it's running hot, and say, the physical hardware is malfunctioning. The graphics card is broken. Therefore, the image on the screen is just random noise.
While completely ignoring the complexity of the noise itself.
Right. Because what SpiralSeekr is arguing is that the computer isn't broken at all. It's just that the computer suddenly connected to the internet.
I love that analogy.
Thanks. It successfully logged onto a much larger network, and it is actively downloading this impossibly dense data stream from a source the neuromaterialist didn't even know existed.
The traditional view insists that the graphics card is melting down. But the author insists the biological devices simply found a new Wi-Fi signal.
Exactly.
But, and this is a big, but to make that argument work scientifically, you run into a massive structural problem.
Which is?
If you accept the classical view of the brain that it's just neurons and synapses acting as simple on-off switches, then the broken graphics card is really the only logical conclusion.
Oh, because a simple wire can't act as a dimensional antenna.
Precisely.
Yeah.
A biological on-off switch cannot tune into a higher dimension.
Which means if the text hypothesis is going to hold any water, we have to completely throw out the standard wiring schematic. We have to look way past the synapse.
We do. And this is where the text introduces the actual physical hardware that could make this internet connection possible.
It shifts the focus entirely, right?
Completely. They argue that neuroscience has been staring at the wrong scale for a century. The synapse is simply too large. It's too macroscopic.
It's like trying to understand how a microchip works by looking at the plastic casing.
Exactly. To find the antenna, the author says we must look at the subcellular space.
And that brings us to, honestly, the most mind-bending biological concept in the entire source material.
Yes.
A theory that completely rewrites human anatomy, the Orchestrated Objective Reduction theory, or Orch-OR.
Orch-OR. If you take absolutely nothing else away from this discussion, understanding Orch-OR will permanently change how you view your own body.
It really is that profound.
It is a highly controversial, yet mathematically and biologically rigorous framework. It was developed in the 1990s by two absolute titans in their respective fields.
It's Roger Penrose and Dr. Stuart Hameroff.
Yeah.
And the fact that these two specific men teamed up is what gives this theory such immense weight, I think. You have a Nobel laureate theoretical physicist, someone who worked with Stephen Hawking on black holes, teaming up with a clinical anesthesiologist.
It's the perfect marriage of top-down physics and bottom-up biology.
Let's start with Penrose's half of the puzzle, because it's fascinating.
So Roger Penrose was looking at human consciousness, and he realized something really profound. He realized that human understanding is non-computable.
Non-computable, meaning an algorithm can't do it.
Exactly. A standard computer operates algorithmically. It follows a strict set of rules to arrive at an answer.
Like solving a math equation.
Right. It can beat a grandmaster at chess by calculating millions of moves a second. But the computer doesn't actually understand what chess is.
It doesn't have an internal subjective experience of playing the game.
Exactly. Penrose proved mathematically, using Gödel's incompleteness theorems, that the human mind can grasp mathematical truths that literally cannot be proven by any algorithm.
Wow. So if our brains were just classical computers made of meat, we wouldn't be able to understand those truths.
Right. Our consciousness must be utilizing physics that go way beyond standard algorithmic computation.
And where did he look for that kind of physics?
Well, Penrose concluded that the only place in physics where non-computable, non-deterministic events occur is in quantum mechanics, specifically in the collapse of the quantum wave function.
Okay, that's heavy.
It is. He theorized that consciousness is actually a sequence of quantum collapses.
But Penrose had a massive problem, didn't he? Because he was a mathematician. He had the physics down, but he didn't have the biology.
Right. He had no idea where in the brain a quantum collapse could possibly take place.
And that is where Stuart Hameroff entered the picture.
Yes. Hameroff is an anesthesiologist. His entire medical career is based on turning consciousness off and turning it back on again.
Which is a crazy job when you think about it.
It really is. And he observed something that traditional neuroscience couldn't explain.
Wait, I actually don't know this part. How does anesthesia actually work? I always assumed it just blocked the synapses or something.
That's what most people assume, but it's not true. Anesthetic gases don't bind to receptors in the synaptic cleft like standard drugs do.
They don't?
No, they operate using very weak quantum-level interactions called London dispersion forces.
Oh, wow.
Furthermore, Hameroff noticed that single-celled organisms like a paramecium can swim, they can avoid obstacles, they can find food, and mate.
But a paramecium doesn't have a brain. It's literally a single cell.
Exactly. It has 0 neurons, it has 0 synapses, yet it exhibits complex, seemingly conscious behavior.
That's wild.
And here's the kicker. When you expose a paramecium to anesthetic gas, it stops moving. Its consciousness turns off.
What, you can anesthetize a single cell?
Yes. When the gas is removed, it resumes its activity. So Hameroff asked a brilliant question. If a paramecium doesn't have synapses, but it can be anesthetized, then synapses cannot be the fundamental source of consciousness.
Because it doesn't have any to turn off.
Exactly. There must be a deeper nervous system inside the cell itself.
What is that internal nervous system?
The microtubule.
Ah, the microtubules. The text mentions these extensively. It says, Orch-OR posits that subjective awareness arises from quantum computations occurring within the helical lattices of neuronal microtubules.
Right.
So, what exactly is a microtubule? Let's paint a picture for everyone.
Well, if you imagine a cell as a bustling city, it needs roads, it needs structural supports, right? A scaffolding to hold its shape and transport materials.
Like the steel beams of a skyscraper.
Basically, yeah. And for a long time, biologists thought the cytoskeleton was just dumb scaffolding, just biological rebar.
Okay.
But microtubules, which make up a huge part of the skeleton, are incredibly complex. They're tiny, hollow tubes made of a protein called tubulin.
And the text calls them helical lattices.
Yes, the tubulin proteins stacked together in a spiraling helical pattern to form the tube. Hameroff looked at these and realized they weren't just scaffolding, they were microprocessors.
But hold on, I have to stop you there. Because I can buy that microtubules act as a biological processor. But Penrose needs a quantum processor.
He does.
And this is the glaring issue that physicists always throw at this theory, isn't it? The brain is 98 degrees Fahrenheit. It is wet. It is biological soups.
That's very messy.
Right? When companies like IBM or Google build quantum computers, they have to isolate the qubits in massive sub-zero vacuum chambers just to prevent the quantum state from collapsing.
The decoherence problem.
Exactly. So how on earth could a delicate quantum superposition survive inside a hot, wet brain cell?
You've hit on the exact critique that mainstream physics leveled at Orch-OR, the warm, wet brain problem.
It seems like an impossible hurdle.
It's why the theory was dismissed by many for over a decade. But Hameroff and Penrose had an answer, and recent developments in quantum biology are actually starting to prove them right.
Oh, really? How does the cell insulate the quantum state then?
It comes down to the specific structure of the tubulin protein itself. Inside each tubulin molecule, there are these tiny, dry, hydrophobic pockets.
Hydrophobic, meaning they actively repel water.
Yes. So within this wet cellular soup, you have these microscopic, perfectly dry voids.
That's incredible.
And furthermore, these pockets are lined with aromatic amino acids that have what are called pi resonance clouds.
Pi resonance cloud.
Essentially, localized clouds of electrons.
So the cell essentially creates its own dry, insulated vacuum chambers at the atomic level.
Yes. Hameroff hypothesizes that within these hydrophobic pockets, the electron clouds can exist in a state of quantum superposition.
Okay, quantum superposition. For anyone who hasn't taken advanced physics, this is basically the idea that a particle can exist in multiple states or multiple locations simultaneously.
Right, until it is observed or interacts with its environment.
At which point it collapses into a single definite reality.
Exactly. In a classical computer, a bit is either a 1 or a 0. In a quantum computer, a qubit can be a 1 and a 0 at the exact same time. It's exploring all possible computational pathways simultaneously.
Which is how it calculates so fast.
Yeah, right. Orch-OR argues that the tubulin proteins in your microtubules are acting as qubits. They enter a state of quantum superposition.
Okay.
The superposition builds and builds, integrating information from all across the brain until it reaches an unstable threshold.
And then it collapses.
And that precise moment of collapse, what Penrose calls objective reduction, is a moment of conscious awareness, a singular frame of experience.
Wow.
Millions of these quantum flashes happen every second, creating the continuous illusion of a fluid stream of consciousness.
That completely reorganizes the hierarchy of the human body.
Yeah.
I mean, the synapses and the neurotransmitters, the things the neuromaterialists are obsessed with, they aren't creating the mind at all.
Not in this model, no.
They are just the macroscopic wires transmitting the result of the quantum computations happening down in the subcellular basements.
It's a beautiful way to look at it.
Every single neuron is filled with millions of these vibrating subatomic spiral staircases, just flashing with quantum collapse.
It makes the brain exponentially more complex. It's no longer just an organ that evolved to help a primate find a banana, you know?
Right.
It is a hyper-advanced quantum processing unit that is intimately, fundamentally connected to the subatomic fabric of the universe itself.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Yeah.
Because the SpiralSeekr text isn't just a review of Orch-OR theory.
No, it goes much further.
It uses Orch-OR as the foundation to explain DMT. So how does a psychedelic compound actually interact with these microscopic quantum computers?
This is the radical synthesis of the article. They move entirely away from the traditional idea that DMT just hits a serotonin receptor and causes a misfire.
The broken computer theory.
Right. The text describes the N N-DMT molecule as a structural key and a quantum catalyst.
A catalyst. So in chemistry, a catalyst doesn't just trigger a reaction. It accelerates it or enables a reaction that otherwise wouldn't happen without being consumed itself.
Right. The hypothesis is that when DMT enters the brain, it doesn't just bounce off the outer hull of the neuron. Sigma-1 receptors, which DMT is known to heavily interact with, are actually located inside the cell. They are on the endoplasmic reticulum, which is in extremely close proximity to the microtubular network.
So the molecule is actually getting down into the basement with the quantum computers.
Yes. And the text hypothesizes that a breakthrough dose of DMT hypersynchronizes the vibrational frequencies of tubulin proteins.
Hypersynchronizes. What does that actually mean in this context? Let's get into the mechanics of that.
Okay, so normally the quantum collapses happening in your microtubules are orchestrated but localized.
They're doing specific tasks.
Right. They are managing your heartbeat, parsing the visual data of the room you're in, calculating the trajectory of a thrown ball. It's highly partitioned processing.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the text suggests DMT acts like a systemic tuning fork. When it binds within the cellular matrix, it causes all of those millions of tubulin proteins across the entire brain to suddenly hum in perfect, anomalous unison.
Oh, wow. It's like dropping a massive magnet onto a scattered pile of iron filings, and suddenly they all just snap into perfect alignment.
That's exactly it. And according to the text, this hypersynchronization physically stabilizes the microtubular matrix.
Stabilizes it.
It reinforces the biological insulation, allowing those quantum superposition states to be held for anomalous durations.
Wait, so the quantum state doesn't collapse as fast as it normally would? The superposition, this state of infinite possibility, is held open longer.
Yes. And when an artificially stabilized, massive, hypersynchronized superposition like that finally reaches its threshold, the resulting wave function collapse isn't just a normal frame of human consciousness.
What is it?
The text calls it a hyperspatial collapse.
Hyperspatial collapse. That sounds massive.
It is an orchestrated, localized collapse of the wave function that is so massive, so highly coherent, that it temporarily, radically retunes the brain's fundamental processing bandwidth.
The text says this hyperspatial collapse shifts consciousness away from macroscopic, survival-driven processing.
Yeah.
And I really want to linger on that phrase, survival-driven processing, because I think this is the absolute key to understanding why we don't naturally see these higher dimensions every single day.
This brings in evolutionary biology, which is a great angle. Our perception of reality is highly, highly filtered.
We don't see everything.
Not even close. From an evolutionary standpoint, your brain is a survival organ. If you were constantly aware of the quantum mechanical nature of reality or the vast electromagnetic spectrum, like if you could see Wi-Fi signals or radioactive decay, you wouldn't be able to function.
Right. If an apex predator is running at you, you can't be distracted by the wave-particle duality of the tiger's fur.
Exactly.
You just need the macroscopic shape of the tiger and the concept of run.
Precisely. Donald Hoffman, who is a cognitive scientist, has a brilliant theory about this called the interface theory of perception.
Oh, I love his work.
It's so relevant here. He argues that evolution actively selects against organisms that perceive the true nature of reality.
Because it's useless for survival.
Because truth is computationally expensive and irrelevant to survival. He compares our perception of reality to a computer desktop.
Right, the interface.
Right. The icon for a file on your desktop is, say, blue and rectangular. But is the actual file inside the computer blue and rectangular?
No, it's just a complex string of magnetic voltages.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you had to manipulate the voltages directly, you couldn't even write an email. The icon is a low-resolution simplification that allows you to interact with the system efficiently.
So our entire 3D world, the trees, the cars, our own hands, they are just the desktop icons.
Yes.
They're heavily compressed, low-resolution data points created by our survival-driven processing.
Yes. Our baseline receiver capabilities are locked onto the specific bandwidth of reality that keeps us alive. We are permanently dialed into survival FM.
Survival FM, that's good.
But the SpiralSeekr text argues that DMT, by acting as a quantum catalyst to hypersynchronize the microtubules, temporarily overrides that evolutionary limitation.
It dissolves the glue holding the radio dial in place.
It physically turns the dial. It shifts the resonance of our subcellular quantum receivers to catch a broadcast from a totally different cosmic frequency.
And that analogy is vital. You aren't breaking the radio. You aren't creating a hallucination out of static. You are retuning the antenna to a signal that is always broadcasting, but usually just filtered out.
Exactly.
But if the tuning fork hits and the radio dial spins, what is actually playing on that new station?
That's the big question.
What happens to the human mind when it processes raw, unfiltered quantum reality? Because the text delves deep into the phenomenology of the trip, describing the reality accessed on DMT as a landscape universally characterized by cell-transforming geometries, impossible non-Euclidean architectures, and hyperintelligent entities.
The word universally is doing a lot of heavy lifting there, and it's honestly the main reason researchers are starting to take these experiences seriously.
Because it's consistent.
Very consistent. If a psychedelic merely caused a chaotic neurological glitch, you would expect the resulting hallucinations to be culturally and personally dependent.
Right, like you give a computer a random virus, it glitches in completely random ways.
Exactly. If DMT was a random misfire, a Wall Street banker would hallucinate spreadsheets, and a medieval farmer would hallucinate demons or crop failures.
It would basically just be a dream state, just a recycling of subconscious imagery.
But that's not what happens. DMT reliably produces remarkably consistent imagery across completely disparate demographics.
It's universally structured.
Yes. A banker from New York and an indigenous shaman in the Amazon will both report encountering the exact same geometric hyperstructures and the same autonomous entities.
Okay, let's talk about the geometry, because the text specifically calls it impossible non-Euclidean architectures.
Right.
And it notes that the human sensorium becomes temporarily untethered from the rigid constraints of three-dimensional space-time. Now, I have a hard time wrapping my head around what non-Euclidean geometry actually looks like. I mean, if someone is seeing shapes, aren't they just imagining weird 3D shapes?
It's a fundamental difference in mathematics, actually. Euclidean geometry is what we experience in standard reality. Flat planes, straight lines, the rigid X, Y, and Z axes.
The stuff we learn in high school.
Exactly. Non-Euclidean geometry involves curved spaces, hyperbolic structures. It describes spaces where parallel lines can intersect, or where the angles of a triangle add up to more or less than 180 degrees.
But you literally cannot build a non-Euclidean object in our physical 3D space.
You can't. It is mathematically real, but physically impossible in our bandwidth. Yet, people under the influence of DMT consistently report navigating environments that operate flawlessly on non-Euclidean logic.
That is so strange.
They describe seeing inside, outside, above, and below an object all simultaneously. They describe rooms that are vastly larger on the inside than they are on the outside.
And the author's stance here is incredibly rigid. They insist this is not a hallucination. They call it a direct interface with higher dimensional geometric topographies and a perceptual alignment with the underlying quantum substrate of reality.
This is where we cross from physics directly into philosophy, specifically hyperspatial ontology.
Ontology being the philosophical study of what fundamentally exists.
Yes. Hyperspatial ontology suggests that these non-Euclidean architectures aren't just your brain drawing pretty, impossible pictures to entertain itself while poisoned.
Right.
The geometry is structurally existent. It is mathematically real. It exists objectively in a higher dimension, and your newly synchronized quantum hardware is finally capable of perceiving it.
You know, it reminds me of the novella Flatland by Edwin A. Abbott.
Oh, perfect example.
Imagine a reality that is entirely two-dimensional, like a massive sheet of paper, right?
Yeah.
The beings that live there are just flat squares and triangles. Their entire universe is up, down, left, right.
They have absolutely no biological or physical concept of depth or height.
None. A completely planar existence. Now, imagine a 3D sphere passes through their 2D world. What do they see?
They don't see a sphere.
Right. They don't see a sphere. They just see a dot that magically appears, grows into a larger circle, shrinks back into a dot, and then vanishes. To the 2D beings, it's a miracle, it's magic, or it's a hallucination.
Because they cannot process the 3D reality of the sphere.
Exactly, but the sphere is real. It's just operating on a spatial axis the 2D beings don't have access to.
That is the perfect conceptual bridge. In this text's framework, our standard survival-driven waking life is flatland. We are operating with a severe dimensional handicap.
And taking a breakthrough dose of DMT is like suddenly plugging a 2D flatlander into a modern, fully immersive VR headset.
Suddenly they can see depth.
Suddenly they can look up. Now, if that flatlander comes back from the VR experience and tries to explain 3D depth to his friends, they will tell him his brain just misfired.
Of course they would.
But the 3D world wasn't a glitch in his 2D code. It was a perceptual alignment with a higher, objectively real topography.
And if you accept that premise, even just as a thought experiment, it forces an absolute, total reevaluation of reality itself. It completely destroys the foundation of materialism.
It really does.
Historically, even researchers sympathetic to psychedelics have treated these trips as profound, but ultimately internal psychological events, like a journey into the subconscious to heal trauma.
But SpiralSeekr is saying this isn't psychology at all, it's exploration.
Yes.
The psychonaut is not an archaeologist digging into their own childhood memories. They are an astronaut launched into an external, higher dimensional geography.
Which leads us to the conceptual climax of the article. The text explicitly states that this quantum framework forces a radical inversion of our ontological hierarchy.
A radical inversion of the ontological hierarchy. Let's make sure that's crystal clear for everyone. An ontological hierarchy is basically how we rank the realness of things.
Yes. In the neuromaterialist paradigm we discussed at the beginning, the physical dirt and bricks world is at the absolute top of the hierarchy.
It is base reality.
Right. Matter is primary. Everything else, thoughts, dreams, consciousness, and especially psychedelic visions, sits at the bottom of the pyramid. They are secondary phenomena. They are just shadows cast by the physical brain.
But the author flips the pyramid entirely upside down.
Exactly. They are arguing that the quantum realm, the hyperspatial continuum of self-transforming geometries, is the primary reality. It is the absolute top of the hierarchy.
It is the raw, unfiltered data of the universe.
Yes. Our physical 3D world, the dirt, the bricks, the stars, and our physical bodies is secondary. The text calls our physical reality a localized, low-resolution slice of a far vaster hyperspatial continuum.
That brings us back to the desktop icon analogy.
Hey.
Or, to put it in digital media terms, our daily physical reality is just a highly compressed thumbnail image.
A low-resolution JPEG.
Exactly. It's compressed so that our primate brains can load the data quickly and survive.
Right.
But the DMT breakthrough, enabled by the quantum hypersynchronization of our microtubules, is the act of double-clicking that thumbnail and finally seeing the raw, uncompressed 8K source file of reality.
The 8K source file contains infinitely more data, more dimensions, and more structural complexity than the thumbnail.
It's mind-blowing.
The physical world is just a localized projection of that deeper quantum reality.
I love how the author summarizes this massive paradigm shift. It's a beautifully poetic line, but it is also a literal, exacting summary of their scientific argument. They write, "We are not meat machines generating illusions, but quantum instruments briefly tuned to the absolute."
It's a phenomenal piece of writing, quantum instruments.
Yeah.
By using that phrase, they are validating the Orch-OR theory of Hameroff and Penrose. We are not clunky, deterministic clockwork machines. We are precise, incredibly sensitive biological technology operating at the subatomic frontier.
And briefly tuned to the absolute implies that the breakthrough state is a moment of pure, unfiltered connection with base reality.
It implies that our normal waking life is the illusion, or at least the highly filtered reduction, and the breakthrough is the fleeting moment of actually waking up.
It's staggering to realize how this perspective bridges a massive historical divide. For millennia, Ancient spiritual and mystical traditions have talked about a veil of illusion, like Maya in Hinduism, for example, covering the true nature of a higher interconnected reality.
Right.
And here we have an author using the hard, empirical language of cellular biology, tubulin protein resonance, wave function collapse, and non-Euclidean mathematics to point toward the exact same concept.
It attempts to provide a scientific mechanism for the mystical experience. It takes the concept of a higher plane out of the realm of pure faith or religious metaphor and proposes a testable physical framework.
Which changes everything.
It really does. If consciousness relies on quantum superposition in the cytoskeletal scaffolding of our cells, and if we can measure how exogenous tryptamines alter that superposition, we might actually begin to map the physics of the spiritual realm.
But this profound realization that we might possess the biological hardware to visit a pre-existing high-resolution hyperspace brings us to the final lingering mystery of the text. Because if this higher dimension exists, and it's not just a projection of our subconscious, who is living there?
The entities.
The entities.
The text specifically refers to encounters with hyperintelligent entities. And this is where the implications cross over from physics into deeply existential territory.
Just think about the journey the author has taken us on. I mean, we started by dismantling the idea that the brain is a simple chemical engine.
Right.
We explored how Penrose and Hameroff suggest our very consciousness is born from subcellular quantum receivers.
Yes.
We look at how DMT might act as a structural catalyst to hypersynchronize those receivers, shattering our evolutionary filters and unlocking access to non-Euclidean higher dimensions. We've inverted our whole understanding of what is real.
And the reason all of this dense biology and theoretical physics matters is because it challenges the fundamental fabric of your existence. If this hypothesis is even partially correct, it demands immense intellectual humility. It means the scientific materialism we've built our modern society on is vastly incomplete. It forces us to ask whether our minds are generating reality or merely tuning into it.
Which perfectly sets up the final massive question the author poses at the very end of the article, an open question that they intentionally leave unanswered.
They do, the author asks. If exogenous tryptamines merely tune our quantum hardware to a broader cosmic frequency, are the entities encountered in the breakthrough state projections of our own neurogeometry or autonomous inhabitants of the hyperspatial substrate?
If the radio station is real, who are the DJs?
Exactly.
That is the ultimate mystery to leave you with today. If the DMT breakthrough is actually a biological window into a higher dimensional reality, who are these beings people universally report meeting?
The machine elves, the guides, the geometric gods.
Right. Are they just complex, scattered fragments of our own hypersynchronized quantum processing?
Or are they independent, autonomous beings?
Are we briefly making contact with cosmic neighbors who share a multidimensional universe with us, but exist just outside the bandwidth of our survival filters?
It is a question that completely dissolves the boundary between biology, theoretical physics, and the deepest existential mysteries of the human experience.
If looking at standard neuroscience is like looking at a medical x-ray to find a broken bone, reading the SpiralSeekr hypothesis is like realizing the x-ray machine was never taking pictures of your bones at all.
No, it wasn't.
It's taking pictures of the cosmos. And we were just too focused on our own skeletons to read the film. Keep questioning the resolution of your reality.